Are on air. So today is Thursday, February 26th, and we are here to talk about the status of Backdrop CMS, issues that Core is working on, or not Backdrop Core, but Backdrop other related stuff we're doing. And at the beginning of every meeting, we have a little period of time when we can make announcements from the PMC, and this week we have a very exciting announcement to make. Nate?
Yeah, it is super exciting. We added our first additional core committer to the Backdrop project. So we now have an additional committer, Wilmont Schillingford, or better known as Doc Wilmont, has joined the list of core committers. So he's taken on, well, he has already been responsible for documentation, writing up the API documentation, change logs, and that sort of thing. And we wanted to empower him to be able to make API changes, not API changes, documentation changes to the core project as well. So now he is joined our list of committers. That's really exciting to expand out a little bit.
So we've updated on the Backdrop CMS primary website, we've updated our leadership page to show the new core committer. We are still looking for more core committers, so I know there have been a couple people who expressed interest in various subsystems, and we have our eyes on a few more. But our leadership diagram shows a lot of core committers, so we're trying to find, you know, now that we have a project out, we will try to kind of fill up the team with people who have already shown their commitment and done a really good job already. It seems like a no-brainer to just say, hey, you're on the team, go ahead and make changes where you feel like it's necessary. If we feel like you've got generally, you know, understanding how things work over here in Backdrop land, it's kind of a easy promotion to just say, okay, we're including more people. So we're super excited that we've got Doc Wilma on board. We actually sent him one email a couple of weeks ago and didn't hear back, and we got really nervous, and we're like, wait, what happened? Turns out he just didn't get the first request. So we sent a second one. He gladly agreed, and we're like, yay. So we'll work out the details of actually getting him added to the list of people who have access to commit, which is good. And then he'll be able to start making documentation changes. And so if you're interested in working on documentation, you'll be submitting pull requests that he will be reviewing and merging, as well as Nate will be reviewing and merging our bug fixes short term. And then, of course, we will have, you know, right now we're still working on the 1.x branch, which means bug fixes and new features, and so there's less work to do urgently, but we do still want to try and build out that team. So that's what we're kind of working on now. We've got our eye on a few people, so yeah, team is still growing, which I think is super exciting for us. All right, so other exciting things since last week, we still have a happy, healthy contrib community. We've got 25 Backdrop contrib authors. I'm not sure these numbers were updated since last week's meeting. There's also a ton of people with applications in the queue, so if we can get them moved through them, we'll have even more, which is good. And we've got, I think, a total of 50 or 51 contrib projects, things that people are working on. And I know there's a bunch more coming down the pipeline as well there too. So I think we're doing a pretty good job on only being out for just over a month and having a bunch of people working with and using Backdrop, which is great. I would love to see, since there are people porting modules like crazy, I would love to see the sites they're working on that require these modules. So if anyone is working on sites and they get them launched, let us know. We're super excited to see what those look like. I just noticed one of them on Twitter today, which is super exciting. And then, of course, there's the ones that we're working on that we know about, like backdropcms.org. But it'll be good to have a list of other ones, too. All right, so let's start with talking about the things that we're working on that are not Backdrop, the product. There's been a bunch of really exciting progress on Drush in the past week. Mike came and wanted to get it working on the latest version of Calabox, and so he spent a couple of days hacking on Drush and Backdrop and totally got it working together. He figured out the parts of Drush that needed to be changed, and we've got some issues in the Drush queue where he's talking about things like Drush checking for the valid Drupal version and obviously not finding that when it's Backdrop, and figured out what needs to be refactored so that Drush can have an easy kind of drop-in Backdrop configuration, which is fabulous. And he's got a version of it working on Calabox that's kind of hacked together, and he even wrote a blog post about how we did that. So if anyone else wants to get it hacked together and working, you can do that today, which is fabulous. And we also have a path forward for fixing those things that were currently hacks. that need to be fixed in a more stable way long term. So I think that is huge in terms of progress for Backdrop. And I think Luke gave a talk on Monday at Berkeley and was talking about how we were working on it, but it didn't work yet. That only came together like really late Sunday night, so there's no way you could have known about that, Luke. But I just thought it was perfect. That was like breaking news. Mike got it working, so that was fabulous. He spent all weekend working on that, and he's going to be in San Diego at Sandcamp this weekend, so we'll talk to him more about that in person and get to thank him greatly for all of his work there. Today, I would like to try and, I know he's specifically been working on Backdrop and Calabox. Today, I'm going to try and duplicate his work in MAMP and see if we can get those same hacks that he did for Drush working in a MAMP environment too, because he said he hadn't done any testing of it in Calabox. So, yep, Backdrop should be working on Calabox, which will be great, and then hopefully we can get it working on MAMP with Drush as well. So I'm super excited about all of those things. So progress on Drush. The next thing on our list here is update server. This is currently blocked by the port of Backdrop CMS to Backdrop. It's currently running Drupal 7, and we're working on a new version of it. There is a new version of the site up at new.backdropcms.org where we have it fully ported to Backdrop. We were waiting on 2 things before we could launch. One of them was redirect module, and one of them was Google Analytics. And I know last night, Nate, you did a bunch of work on getting redirect and Google Analytics running, and I think we are close enough. So I know we got a port of redirect last week and hadn't tried it yet, so sorry for the delay on that. But we've got everything going now, and I think we should be ready to launch that site in a day or 2. We've got a couple of other modules like Honeypot that we need something on that form on the homepage for people to submit their logos just to prevent us from getting a bunch of spam. Right now it's currently moderated anyway, so I think we could launch the site without it. It's just long-term. We need something on there before the robots find us. So getting Honeypot ported would be good. I know there's 2 people, Luke, you mentioned working on it. Someone else had mentioned working on it a couple of weeks ago, which is why Nate and I hadn't started porting on it. So I was just to check on it and see if there's an issue in the issue queue or someone mentioned it should be tagged with Backdrop port, so you can look for that. Or if you don't see one, go ahead and create an issue and ask, because it could be that whoever is working on the port, didn't ask the issue ahead of time, and didn't ask in the Drupal queue. But I think there is someone working on it already, so it'd be good to not duplicate that effort if possible. But yeah, so I think we're close enough to launch that site any day now. We'll need to run the upgrade path one more time because I noticed that we've got some documentation changes on the live site and some new supporters that we don't want to lose in the process. But that should be going up in a day or 2, which is good. And then the update checking, which is currently blocked by that, we have a plan for that too on the new Backdrop website. Nate has been working on a module that'll integrate with Github. I don't think we have any particular updates on this since last week, since I think it's ready. But we just need to get that site ported to Backdrop so we can actually use it. Nate, do you want to give a little update on that?
Yeah, the packager is totally ready to go. I'm sorry, Jen, I'm going to mute you. The packager is totally ready to go. It works really well, actually. But it's dependent upon the new site getting launched on Backdrop because it's actually a module. So the Backdrop main site will be the responder to a webhook from GitHub, and then GitHub will send us a ping every time a new release is made, and then the packager will run adding in the Backdrop version information into the .info files, and then rezipping it back up and then pushing it up as an asset to GitHub. The reason why the main site is going to be doing the packaging is because at the same time, it's also going to need to update or create a release node on backdropcms.org. So we'll make backdropcms.org into kind of the canonical central repository, very similar to Drupal.org. So the packager is done. It's just waiting on the site to be launched, and then we'll start having package releases that actually have the version information tagged inside of them. And then from there, we'll start working on building up the project repository. So things are coming along really nicely, just one thing at a time.
That's great. So that will be all projects that are currently in the contrib group. We'll be able to package and put up right away. Okay. So then the only thing that would be left is if you have a project that is not in the contrib group and you want it listed on the API site, we also, or sorry, on the main backdropcms.org site, we also need to open up the node creation process to authenticated users so that you can create a node. And then I know we wanted to put single sign-on with GitHub in there as well so that you could use your GitHub account as your Backdrop account too. So maybe we should create, and I'm not even sure there's an issue for this yet, but to create that single sign-on Backdrop module that would let you do that between one and the other. And then if we had someone who wanted to start on that, we could do that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So that sounds really good. I mean, if we can get the site up soon, then we can get our, you know, we can get our packaging script up, which would be responsible for creating nodes on Backdrop site, which means we can build a module theme layout search tool that is not GitHub, which is really exciting to me. So that's fabulous. We also have kind of a long-term plan to create an official GitHub service for Backdrop. This would allow anyone who creates a module theme or layout on GitHub to check a box, and that would be the equivalent of listing it as a sandbox project on backdropcms.org. But I think that is far less urgent than getting our official projects listed on backdropcms.org. So that's kind of lower priority, and it requires some expertise that none of us in this room necessarily have. But if anyone wants to play a little bit with GitHub, there's a really great tutorial there with good and bad examples of what services should be like, and we can get that added at any time in the future. So other things we're working on, we've got our API website. I think it works fabulously right now. It's lists all of our code, so I often use it when I'm trying to tell the differences between Backdrop and Drupal. You can just type in function names, and if the function is a function that's been removed, it'll automatically pull up the change record because it runs a search as well as just autocomplete on the function name, which Nate implemented and works so well. And there's also, I think, almost a complete set of change records on there. We only are missing 2. I think there's 2 or maybe 3 that we have either noticed since Backdrop 1 was released or made changes since Backdrop 1 that need to be added. Everything else should be there. If you guys are using the API site and you notice a change record that needs an update, go ahead and create an issue against the API site and we can fix it. I haven't really been reading them over or looking at them or anything. I haven't heard anything about them, so I'm assuming they're all good, which is great. But if not, we can fix that too. So just as anyone is using it, keep an eye out for things that might need an update. And then the only thing that I think is left for the API site is to get the theme from the new Backdrop site potentially ported to it. And we've obviously been waiting on getting the new Backdrop site done first. We have Darius doing a design review of that. I think obviously today he's doing a training on Backdrop, which is exciting too. But at some point he'll do a design review of the new theme and make sure we haven't missed anything. I think there's some form styles and stuff that are currently missing. But as soon as we get that theme done, we'll try and drop that on the API site and make sure that it works as well as the current theme, if not better. And then that should be done after that. So speaking of our primary website, we've already talked a little bit about, we've got the package script going, we've got it ported to Backdrop, we've got all of the modules we need almost ready, which is great. There's new features we'd like to add to. Obviously getting modules and themes pages up there and layouts is going to be important. And then building an interface for actually searching and finding what you need is also going to be super important. So we're going to start doing a design process for that as soon as we get sign off on the current theme working the way it's supposed to. And then we'll get those modules and themes pages up so that people can search for things that they need for Backdrop on that site. And then as soon as we get that done, we're going to move on to building a showcase. So anyone hopefully will be wrapping up their new Backdrop sites about the same time we get done with the module search. Wants to enter those, it'll be the same process as creating a node for a project. You log in the site and you can create a node and you can post information about the site that you built. It's going to be modeled very much off of the Drupal showcase on Drupal.org. So same kind of thing where people are going to want to see working examples of Backdrop sites, and the more we can put up there, the better. Obviously, the better also. So make your Backdrop sites, make them awesome, and we'll throw them up there too. Also with links back to your site to help, a little SEO thank you love there too. All right, so that's what we have on the table for things that are not Backdrop the product itself. We're going to talk a little bit about what's left to do for Backdrop in Backdrop 1 as well. Obviously, as we are working on Backdrop, we will discover bugs and we will fix those as needed. There are obviously a lot of bugs in Backdrop, just like there are a lot of bugs in Drupal today. And as we discover them and fix them, we'll merge those into the current version. If we find one that we think is dangerous enough or a big enough improvement that we want to issue a bug fix release, we'll do that. I don't know that we have any fixes right now. I think the biggest thing is getting our themes configuration importable. So right now, if you have a theme that has configuration and you try and move your config files in, none of your site will import at all, which is a pretty serious bug. So as soon as we get that fixed, we'll probably want to issue a bug fix release. So I know we have an issue. I think, Luke, did you create an issue in the queue? If you didn't create one, I might have created one. Yeah, so there's an issue in the queue for that. We just need to get a working pull request on that, and then we'll probably do a bug fix release. And when that release comes out, all of the other little bug fixes that we fixed along the way will go with it. So I think that's what's next coming up for bug fixes. And then there's a bunch of new features we're working on adding as well. And those features currently include trying to get a rich text editor in core, which is not a small feat. We talked a little bit last week in detail about the actual process for getting from where we are now to getting that rich text editor in core, so I'm not going to go over it in too much detail. But it does not involve porting the WYSIWYG module or the CK module or any of the solutions that we have currently in Drupal 7 to Backdrop. So it's going to require kind of a lot more focus and a lot more thought about the architecture of the system. And Nate has done this once already for Drupal 8. We're going to kind of be modeling a little bit of the way that it was done in Drupal 8, but rather than having them be completely separate modules for something like editor and filter, we're going to merge those together because we want less swappability in Backdrop. It's more about getting a really seamless integration. So doing as much as we can directly to core to get that in, I think, would be the right way to go for us. So I'm not sure if there's an issue yet with all of the implementation details, but if anyone wanted to work on that, we should maybe start talking about technical implementation details on that too. That's our biggest thing that we are likely to not get done in time for 1.1, but it is also one of the most important things, obviously, near and dear to our hearts, since Nate did a bunch of work on that in Drupal 8, and yeah, with WYSIWYG editing, something everyone loves. So that's on our to-do list. Another thing that we want to do is take the token module and put that in core. And we have a working token module for Backdrop. This was the token module from Drupal 7 that was ported. It's got a fancy new UI. It integrates with the dialogue system. It's going to be a huge step forward in terms of a whole bunch of other stuff that depends on token module. The more we can get in core, the better. But we need to figure out not how to take the contrib module and just put it in core the same way it is now, but how to more tightly integrate that with core itself. So, for example, all of the tokens that are provided by token module need to be distributed to their modules that they should have originally come from, and the user interface itself should probably be moved into system. So rather than having a separate module to turn on, it just becomes more of core. Core just provides that functionality. So that, again, is going to require a little bit of architecting, or at least a little bit of thought, kind of un-architecting rather than architecting, I suppose, as to where to put all of those pieces. And then similarly, we're going to try and put in Path Auto module, which we also have a complete working port in Drupal. We took the Drupal 7 version and ported that to Backdrop, so we have a complete working port of that exact module. In order to put that in core, it's going to be the same kind of thing where instead of being a separate module that you turn on or off, it should integrate directly with Path module. And so we'll need to figure out where the user interface for that should be. Should it be on a settings tab integrated with Path? Where do the configurations for those go? I recommend like vertical tabs on the entity bundle form. But there's just some kind of thought about how the stuff in Path Auto needs to be distributed into Path to get to working core. Same thing, de-architecting involved in that. So if we wanted to have someone work on either of those, probably some technical implementation details in the issue we have already would be a good starting point. So And those things are very likely to get completed by 1.1, which is May, which is now it's the end of February, so we've got 2 months left. I think getting those modules ported and ready and working for Backdrop was a great first step. Next step is smooshing them into core. So if anyone wants to work on those are slightly easier than trying to get the rich text editor in. And then the last thing that's on my hit list for 1.1 is changing the administration look and feel for Backdrop so that when you're using Backdrop, it doesn't feel like using Drupal 7. And we've got a great new style guide that Darius and Ronnie and Wes have all been working on. And now we have a whole bunch of other issues about how to implement the changes from the style guide for Backdrop, which is great. And I know on my plate is to get the style guide module for Backdrop finished. It's working right now if you guys want to install it. Just there's a style guide for comments that is not working. And I think everything else works just fine. I'll try and get the comments wrapped up right now. But the style guide that we're using as our guide doesn't actually have things like comments on it anyway. So if you wanted to proceed with everything we already have styled, it's ready for that. You can throw it on a Backdrop site and you'll get the same style guide out and you can start styling the elements. So it should be good enough for that. I want to make it work the way the Drupal 7 style guide module worked, which means it'll show you what comments look like and what the comment form looks like, and you can style those all in the same place too. So it needs a little bit of work for Backdrop contrib land, but it is ready for what we need to do in core if anyone wants to start working on those issues. So I think that's a great starting point. I also noticed we got a ton of really good feedback on our style guide that hasn't been addressed. It hasn't been addressed because Darius is running a training today on Backdrop, so he's obviously a little bit busy and has been for the last week. But I think that a lot of the suggestions are really good ones, and what I was planning on doing today after this meeting is taking the suggestions that were made in the issue queue, especially technical implementation suggestions, and moving them to the issues about technical implementation so that the issue queue for the style guide just becomes recommendations on style changes, not technical recommendations on how do we implement our bug fixes. And then that way when Darius is done with his training and has had a nap, he can go back and look at that and say, oh yeah, we forgot to style the quote, or we should make the block quote wider, or whatever the design things he needs to focus on actually are. And that, I think, is really great. We've got some things that don't have any feedback that can be implemented right away, like everybody loves a pager, right? So if somebody wanted to start working on those today, like pager is ready to be styled and implemented in Backdrop. And I think the more we can get, this one's ready versus this one isn't, I think we'll just kind of start knocking them out. So I think there's been a whole bunch of great progress on that already, and I'm super excited to see those changes moving into core. All right, so those are our major hit list items for 1.1. There's obviously a ton of other stuff that we're working on all the time. Things like developer experience are super important to us here in Backdrop land because Backdrop, more than anything else, is a tool for building websites. So that means that it needs to be easy to click together and it needs to be easy to implement. So developer experience, how does it feel to port those modules? How does it feel to build sites with Backdrop? How does it feel to write your own theme? If you find things that are weird, create issues for us, tag them with DX, and we'll look at how to solve them. Developer experience improvements can't always be done in 1.x because sometimes it will require an API change. But if we can introduce a wrapper function that'll help with backwards compatibility, or a wrapper function that will help with your module load include weird argument order, whatever it is, we can add those things. We just can't change the way anything that's currently in there works, like order of arguments or anything like that. But having the issues documented means that we can either recognize it's an issue and fix it now, or postpone it to 2.x and fix it in the future. But we do want to know what the issues are so we can solve them. And the same thing goes for user experience. Drupal has had a long history of being not the easiest tool to use, and part of that is just because it's super flexible and can do everything. And we're not going to be able to solve all of those problems with Backdrop because it's also really flexible and can do lots of stuff. But there are some things that we can seriously improve in the user experience area, particularly around terminology. So using edit when you mean edit, and using configure when you mean configure. Things like this are easy for us to clean up. They're novice tasks in terms of making the actual changes to the code. It's just someone has to kind of notice that it wasn't doing it correctly and point it out, and then someone else needs to change it, and then we need to merge it in. And so there's a whole bunch of issues in our queue already tagged with DX. that'll help us find developer experience issues and UX for user experience issues. And I think anyone who's looking for some low-hanging fruit for Backdrop can search the queue and find those. We did have a question why some of our issues use labels to identify things and some of our issues use square tags. So in the GitHub queue, we don't have the ability to add different vocabularies the way that you do in Drupal, where you can have something for, what's the status of this issue versus what type of thing is it versus what status, what a system is a defect or anything like that. And so in GitHub, all we have is one group of labels, and we've tried to organize those labels by prefixing them with something like audience or status or pull request status. But there isn't really room in the list of labels for every tag that we're going to want to add onto an issue queue. So for things that are actually tags, like things that anyone just wants to add on an issue, we've been using square brackets. So square bracket UX, square bracket DX, those are tags, so they go in the issue title in square brackets. And things that are actually a status or a categorization of that issue are in the labels. So that is a little bit confusing, but that's how we have to work with the tool that we are using. So that's kind of how things work in the issue queue. But yeah, there's plenty of issues, easy ones, hard ones, anything anyone wants to work on, all up for grabs. And every Thursday after this meeting, we usually hang out in IRC in the Pound Backdrop channel and try and crank through a bunch of those issues together. So Nate and I will be here today organizing issues and working on the Backdrop site as well as the Backdrop product itself. And if anyone else wants to grab something, we're usually around to offer help on Thursdays as well. If it's not a Thursday and you want to work on Backdrop, we are also usually in the IRC channel, though maybe not working on Backdrop ourselves. And we're always around to answer questions. So, and even if Nate and I aren't there, there's usually other people in the IRC channel who will also answer questions. So if you want to jump in and ask a question, there's usually friendly people around to help, or sometimes grumpy people, depending on if it's 3 in the morning or not. But yeah, so the Backdrop community hangs out online in the IRC channel, Pound Backdrop. We also have a Reddit. If IRC isn't your thing, it's too nerdy for you, and you just want to ask questions, we have a subreddit at reddit.com/r/backdrop or something. And that Reddit seems to be completely working. There's a whole bunch of noise in there. People are asking questions, answering questions. So I guess Reddit. Reddit is still fairly nerdy. We are nerdy people. We also have a Facebook group if you're not into Reddit, and there's a LinkedIn group, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff where you can find us online. But it seems to be that most of our nerdiest people are hanging out either in IRC or on Reddit. So that's where you can find the Backdrop community. But yeah, we are going to be doing a in-person sprint at MidCamp in Chicago next month on the Sunday following the camp, which is kind of exciting. There is a Google spreadsheet where people can sign up if you want to come sprint on Backdrop. Nate and I will be there, and we've got our names in there. I think, Doug, if you're going to be there, you can put your name there. Andy, I don't know if you're coming to MidCamp, but you can throw your name in the spreadsheet too. We're going to be sprinting alongside the Drupal 8 folks, so I think it'll be kind of good to have us all be able to collaborate and talk in the same room and get along and show that we all love each other. So that'll be good. And then this weekend, obviously, Sand Camp is happening right now. Darius is doing a training right now for people on the new layout system, which is super, super exciting. And Nate and I will be doing a talk there tomorrow about Backdrop. And hopefully it will be well received, but we'll see. Backdrop-friendly events. We also have a calendar in Google that you can subscribe to that will list Backdrop-friendly Drupal events. And so if anyone is attending an event that we don't know about that is Backdrop-friendly, let us know and we'll add it to that calendar too. So that's not just for us, that's for anyone who wants to go anywhere and talk about Backdrop and be loved by your fellow nerds. We can just throw that on the calendar. So let's see. Other things to talk about. There is a Drupal Watchdog article coming out in May, which should coincide roughly around DrupalCon LA that Nate and I have both written articles for. There might be some other Backdrop-friendly articles in there, which is super exciting. Today there was another blog released about co-maintaining Drupal 7 and Backdrop modules at the same time, which I think is something that's going to be super relevant for a lot of people for a number of years to come, which is really good. If anyone has anything else that they've seen on the internet that's super exciting, let us know about it. We're always interested to see what other people are saying about Backdrop, not necessarily us. And yeah, I think that's all I have for today's meeting. But we should open it up a little bit to see if any of you have any questions or comments or things you want to talk about or things we should talk about every week.
I had one. I was on the. I can hear myself. It's a little weird. The ticket log for the style guide, actually implementing it. There's not really a way to mark things that are blocked. So I was thinking maybe a label that's status blocked. Does that sound appropriate? Oh, and now I can't hear anything.
Oh, sorry, I muted Jen because she was the echoey one. So I can't unmute you though, Jen. So.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just saying that maybe we should just go ahead and add that issue or that tag to the queue unless you had a strong feeling against it. The label for status blocked.
There is postponed. I guess it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah, I just wanted easy way for people to see. Oh, the pager is good to go. There's no issues in that other style guide ticket that are blocking it, so we can just go ahead and do that. And I can be responsible for making sure when things get blocked or cleared or whatever on that. Does that work?
Yeah, I wonder. Do you think? I guess we could mark it blocked. I'm trying to figure out if we already have needs feedback, for example, and we already have postponed. And I would think maybe a combination of needs feedback and postponed would be kind of the equivalent of blocked.
Well, postponed means we're not going to do this yet. I mean, I guess that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, and we kind of have feedback, but it's for Darius. That's why it's like.
Yeah.
I don't know that we want to invite more feedback on something that's blocked.
Okay. What do you think, Jen?
I mean, so lots of the hesitation here is that the GitHub UI is really horrible when you have a lot of labels. And so we're trying to figure out how to manage this creeping label problem. And so we looked at all the labels that were on Tool.org and we tried to remove the ones that we thought that we didn't actually need. And I actually went and removed a bunch where Nate was like, I need those, I use those all the time. And so then I had to put them back. So we're trying not to add too many more. I think we could use postponed as long as we knew that that's what we were using it for.
Okay.
Because postponed kind of means oh, we're not going to do this until 2.x, or we're not going to do this until something else. It doesn't necessarily mean, at least the way we're using it now, we're going to unpostpone it as soon as this other issue is resolved. But we could use it for that in this case, as long as we were, I mean, we could make that our policy of when something's blocked, mark it postponed, and then put the, some comment in there that says this is blocked based on whatever, we'll unpostpone it when it's done.
Yep.
And I think it's fine as long as you, as long as we're managing that so that all these issues don't end up postponed and never unpostponed.
Right, yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye on it.
Okay, so let's try that first and see if that works. And if it does, then we don't need to worry about adding a blocked tag. And if it starts to become unclear as to what's going on, we can try and change it. Okay. Any other questions or comments or anything we should talk about today? No. Well, thank you all so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. This is quite the crowd.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and jump off then, and we will move the chatter to IRC #Backdrop. If you have anything to share with Backdrop, you can always tweet at Backdrop CMS, or we have a contact form on the website if you have any specific questions. The best thing, though, would be to find the community on the Reddit, in the IRC channel, or on Twitter. We also are using the hashtag #Backdrop CMS too. I know some people have been using #Backdrop, but there's a lot of photo Instagram stuff that uses #Backdrop, and so we're trying to keep it #Backdrop CMS. So if you are tweeting, go ahead and add the CMS, and that'll be a little less confusing for everyone. So yeah, we'll see you guys on the internet or next week, same bad channel.
All right, thanks for joining, everybody. Bye-bye.